we're just going to continue to read out of So Be It, and we are in chapter 23. The title is called So Be It. We buried Mama the next day in a small cemetery near an apple orchard, only a mile or so from Hilltop. Roy and Ruby were there, and Thurman Hill too, though he stood apart from us, over near the gate where we first came in. I had spoken to Bernie on the phone the night before and told her I didn't want the pastor to speak at Mama's funeral. I think I should do it, I said. Bernie tried to help me come up with the right words to say. When people die, we usually talk about the things we'll miss about that person, she said, or the worthwhile things they did while they were alive. Who the person was, I asked. Exactly, Bernie said. Who the person was. That night, after Bernie and I hung up, I took a square of paper from a pad next to the phone and made a list. I planned to read it aloud the next day at Mama's funeral. Did you remember to bring it? I asked Ruby as we walked across the wet grass to where Mama's casket lay next to a pile of freshly dug brown earth. Yes, sweetie, I have it, she said, patting her pocketbook. We stood there for a minute quietly, and then I unfolded the little square of paper I'd been holding in my hand since we'd left the house. Who she was. Sophia Lynn DeMuth. So be it. Precious bouquet. Mama. Sooth. I had planned to read the list out loud and not say anything more than that, but when I looked at Mama's word written there at the bottom of the page, suddenly something turned inside of me like a key. I looked over at Thurman Hill, standing quietly by the gate, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his eyes cast downward. I already knew that Mama loved me, I began. I just thought she didn't have a word for it, but I was wrong. All along, she had a word for love. It was just different from the one everyone else was using. We all had names for Mama, Precious Bouquet, Sophia Lynn DeMuth, Mama, but she didn't call herself by any of those. She called herself So Be It, and it didn't matter that no one else ever called her that. It was still who she was. A long time ago, somebody else who loved Mama gave her another name, Sooth. But when she said that word, she wasn't talking about herself. Sooth wasn't Mama's name. Sooth was Mama's name for love. Then it was time for Mama to be lowered into the ground. Ruby opened her pocketbook and handed me a small package wrapped in tissue. Bernie had sent it from Reno, and I had asked Ruby to carry it for me to keep it safe. Unwrapping the layers, I gently set Mama's white teacup with the gold rim on top of the casket. Next to that, I put the big box of juju fruits that I had bought at the gas station where I'd asked Roy to stop on the way. One end of it was open, because I'd taken out all the green ones and thrown them away. I closed my eyes and thought about Mama, about the way she looked the last time I saw her, leaning out the window with Bernadette, waving goodbye to me as I set off on my journey. Tea, Heidi? I heard her voice say in my head. Yes, Mama, tea, I answered. Then I sat next to her on the couch one last time and tasted the sweet, hot, milky tea. I saw Mama smile. I felt Mama's hand patting my knee. I looked into her pale, wide-set blue eyes. Back soon, Heidi, she said. Back soon? Goodbye, Mama, I whispered. That night, I was sitting with Roy and Ruby in their living room, still wearing the same clothes I'd worn to the cemetery. Ruby had put out plates of leftover pot roast, but nobody seemed to be very hungry. I just can't get over that haircut, Roy said, looking at me. She looks so much older, doesn't she, Rube? He'd said that same thing 3 times already, just while we'd been sitting there. I think we all knew there was something we needed to talk about. We were thinking maybe you would like to stay with us for a while, Ruby said. You can enroll at the junior high school here in town and live right here with us. Give you a chance to get to know Elliot and your grandfather, Roy said. We could paint your room, wallpaper it, whatever you like, said Ruby. I looked at them, sitting there side by side on the couch, and thought about the memory game. I wish the rules could be different, that there could be more than one match for every card. But Ruby had been right. Sometimes life just isn't fair. A few days later, we stopped at Hilltop on the way to the airport. I stood with Elliot in the rec room in front of the big stone fireplace so Ruby could take a picture of us to show to Bernie. He didn't call me Sooth this time. Maybe I didn't look like Mom anymore with my hair cut short. Thurman Hill stayed away until we were about to leave. Then he came over and handed me an envelope. This is everything from the files about your mother. I've included some photographs too, from the year she was here with us and also of the rest of the He hesitated over the next word. Family. I think you'll find you look a great deal like the late Mrs. Hill, especially now with your hair that way. She was a lovely woman, Elliot's mother. I could tell that it wasn't easy for him, talking to me like that. After all, he'd pay a small fortune not to have to known I even existed. Before I left, he said one more thing to me. I know this is probably impossible after all that's happened, but someday I would like to know you. Later, I was glad I hadn't said what had been right on the tip of my tongue. There are some things in life a person just can't know. A lot of things changed after Mama died. At first, I was sad all the time, but Bernie told me to feel whatever I felt until I was done feeling it. And even though I still haven't gotten over it, after a while, I was pretty much okay. Ruby and Roy had planted a seed in my head, and I enrolled in the local junior high school in Reno, where everyone knew me as Heidi DeMuth. Xander and I still hung out in the afternoons, and we took turns babysitting for the Judikoff twins. Bernie quit drinking coffee because she read somewhere that caffeine makes anxious people more anxious, and she also decided to try to learn how to cook. Another thing that was different was that after I came back from Liberty, my lucky streak, at least when it came to gambling, disappeared for good. Bernadette flipped coins for me sometimes just to check, but I only guessed right about the same amount a normal person would. I did go back to visit Liberty. The first time was the fall after Mama died, when we put the stone on her grave. It was made of pink marble with the list of Mama's names carved on it in script. That, and the one that we kept taped to the inside of the kitchen cabinet in the apartment in Reno, are the only lists that remain from that time in my life. Ruby's belly was big as a basketball that fall. Her baby was born a few months later, a little girl they named Aurora at my suggestion. We'd given up hope of ever having a family, Roy told me when he called from the hospital the day she was born. Ruby's convinced she passed that good luck of yours on to her, you know? I hoped she was right. I didn't see Elliot or my grandfather the first time we went back. Roy offered to drive me over to Hilltop, but I just wasn't ready. It would take some time. A few days after I returned home, I was waiting in line at the Double D in Reno when I spotted a box of Juju fruits in the candy rack and tossed it onto the counter. Later, back at the apartment, I took it into my room and sat there staring at the familiar yellow box with a picture of the colorful candies on the front. I thought about Mama and Bernie and me and the life we'd had before I went to Liberty. Suddenly, I noticed something I'd never seen before. The name of the company that makes Juju fruits is written on the side in small black letters inside a red diamond. Heidi. It's not spelled the same, ending with an E instead of an I. But even so, I'm pretty sure it would sound the same if you said it out loud. Heidi. I wondered if my grandmother Diane DeMuth used Juju fruits to coax Mama to do things the way Bernadette and I used to. I wondered if maybe she saw that word on the side of the box the day I was born and thought what a nice name it would make for a little girl. I sat there wondering those things until I heard Bernie calling from the kitchen. Come here for a second, will you, Heidi-ho? I'm trying to follow this recipe Ruby sent me for a pot roast, and I'm making a mess of things. I need you to look up the word brace for me. M-B-F. I tossed the yellow box aside. Coming, Bernie, I called. And I walked across the room past all that was missing, through the door and into the light that shone like a sweet, wide smile over all that was actually there. And that is the end of our book, So Be It.